Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the Local Review Body for the 2nd of March 2026. As always, I will start by making some introductions. I am Councillor Bob Braun. I am the convener of the Local Review Body, and with me today I have on my left Councillor Keith Allen and on my right Councillor David Illingworth. We are all by requirement members of the Planning and Placemaking Committee. To my far right is Mrs. Leslie Tierney. She is a planning advisor to the LRB and has not been involved in any of these items until they have been put forward for appeal. To my left, beyond Councillor Allen, is Mr. Colin Elliott, who is our legal advisor for today, and to his left is Ms. Audrey Brown from Democratic Services. So members, first of all, may I ask, do we have any declarations of interest this afternoon? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, convener. Yes, I have a non-financial interest and declare I need to step out from items 4.2 and 4.3, which are both based in my ward in Braco. Thank you.
And Councillor Illingworth.
I'm aware that I know the mother of the applicants for 4.2 through our joint work as the IJB, but having taken legal advice from our legal department, I do not need to declare an interest.
Thank you for that. We now move on to the next item, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. I'm happy to approve those as I was the only member who was on that particular committee meeting, so they're approved. Now, members, we've got off to a quick change here because of Councillor Allen. Are we happy to move items 4.2 and 4.3 forward in the agenda to hear them first, which allows the reserve to sit in and obviously not have them waiting? So we're happy to move those forward, please, for the first two items. Yes. Thank you very much. Then, Councillor Allen, could I ask you please to leave us? And Councillor Cuthbert, will you now come in? Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. And for the purpose of audiovisual, Councillor Cuthbert is now to my left and is seating in reserve for Councillor Allen. Now we now move to the actual full items of the agenda. And as we've decided, we're going to take item 4.2 next, which is the erection of a dwelling house land 40 metres southeast of Calziveg, Braco, Dunblane. And Mrs. Tierney, if you'd introduce the case for us.
Thank you, convener. Just run through the presentation to start with. So location of the PO site marked with the yellow star, so you can see proximity of that to the village of Braco. And then as we zoom in just on the property, you can see kind of very rural location that's located in to the west of Braco there. And then these are some drawings that were submitted with the planning application. So again, Braco is off the plan here, but to the east there. The red line application site boundary runs all the way from the main public road. So that's why it's kind of got that long line. And then it runs up to Calziveg with the red line around the application site. And then zooming in on that, the red line comes in front of the existing dwelling house and stables, and the site is to the front of the end of the stable building there. The red line is the rectangle, the position of the dwelling house is within where the purple circle is there. And then looking at that in a bit more detail, you can see the location of the proposed dwelling house. And then just zooming in on that, again, you can see the end of the existing stable building there, the red line of the site boundary, the access into the site, and the position of the house within that. This is looking from southeast. towards the existing house, which is on the left-hand side, the stable building to the side of that, and then the position of the house located in front of the steading, existing trees shown. And then it's an application for full planning permission, so we have the full floor plans, roof plans, sections and elevations of the proposed property, 1.5 stories, dormer to the front, glazing, etc. So then some images now. So this is as you come up to the top of the track. Again, you can see the farmhouse there, the existing stable building, and the yellow arrow indicates the position of where the house would be. And then this is from a little bit further away. Again, you can see the existing trees and the end of the steading, and the house would be located within the yellow oval there. And then this is as you come up to the front of the house and the steading. Again, you can see where the yellow arrow is where the house would be located. These are just some views from round about. So this is essentially from the application site. You can just see the edge of the existing house there on the right. This is looking west. And then this is coming round towards the south. And on the left-hand side there would just be the start of the edge of the application site. And then again, this is just coming around a little bit further towards the east now, looking probably more towards Braco, and the yellow arrow indicates the position of the house. And then this is the access into the appeal site, so the yellow line there kind of just runs across the front of the site. And then this is just to kind of show you the makeup of the ground. There is some kind of flatter areas within the site. The photo on the left is more kind of, I believe it was a former midden, so there's various things being dumped on the site over the years, as you would find on a farm. This is kind of standing back probably just towards the existing buildings, looking towards the site. And then again, this is probably looking more directly over exactly where the house would be located, kind of over that kind of dumping midden area. And again, just the house would be located between that kind of midden area and the flatter area at the front. These are images of the back of the stables building. So obviously the steading building is used as stables fundamentally, but there are extended areas around the back where, for hay and for the existing farming activities. And then these are just some images from the front. So as you look back towards the existing house and stables, and then the stable building itself. And then a couple of other images there just to give you an impression of the site, the surrounding area. And then this is really just for information. This is the urban-rural classification that the Scottish Government uses to define rural areas. It's all to do with distance to main bodies of population. We are, even though this is a very remote-looking countryside area, we are in the accessible rural area. And that will be to do with the drive time to the nearest major settlements. But you can see there it is quite close to the edge of the yellow area, which is remote rural area. And I'll come on to a bit of more of an explanation of the relevance of that. So yes, the proposal is for the erection of a dwelling house on land adjacent to the existing house and stables at Calsiveg. This land has been owned and farmed alongside the successful equine breeding unit and livery yard by the applicant's family for several decades. The current farm and equine business will be developed further into a mixed farming and equestrian enterprise with environmental and climate-related diversification over the next 10 years. The applicant's mother, who lives at Calsiveg, is having to reduce her involvement and hand over the businesses due to health issues, and the applicant has therefore returned to the area to take over. The house is proposed to be located immediately adjacent to the existing house and the stables and steading building. The reasons for refusal are firstly that the proposal is contrary to MPF 4, Policy 17, Rural Homes. A5, as it has not been demonstrated that an additional house is necessary to support the sustainable management of a viable rural business or croft, and there is an essential need for an additional worker, including those taking majority control of a farm business, to live permanently at or near their place of work. In this case, the existing equine business has a dwelling, and the farming element is based on future proposals and plans. The proposal is further contrary to Part 5, as it is not for a single home for the retirement succession of a viable farm holding. The existing business is equine, not a viable farm holding. Secondly, the proposal is contrary to Policy 19 of the Perth and Kinross LDP 2019 and the associated supplementary guidance 2020, as the proposal fails to satisfactorily comply with Category 3 new houses in the open countryside, and that the proposal is not sufficiently robust in demonstrating that there is an economic need for an additional dwelling at the existing equine business and that the agricultural need is based on future proposals and plans. It is also considered that the proposal cannot satisfy any of the remaining categories. Turning to the assessment by the Planning Service, the site has an existing business, an equine sports horse business, breeding quality brood mares alongside a sheep flock of seasonal grazers. A livery yard has also been in operation for the last 3 years. However, much of the case is built on future expansion and diversification to grow more crops, reseed grassland, then increase stock density and produce additional hay, with plans to introduce a breeding flock working towards 250 breeding ewes in the next 3 years, raise some store cattle and store lambs. Supplementary guidance clarifies the evidence to support a new house for a farm worker on economic activity grounds should be in the form of a business appraisal based on the labour hours for the existing farming operation. It must be demonstrated that a new house is essential to the continued operation of the farm for animal welfare reasons. The total labour units required is stated as 1.22. This, however, includes 175 hours per annum on crops and grassland, which would not count, those not being for animal welfare purposes, and 640 hours per annum on horses. The horses are part of an equine business, either breeding or livery services, rather than part of the farming operation. The remaining 1,504 hours per annum relate to proposed livestock. It is noted that there is a current grazing flock, but its size is not stated. Therefore, based on the information provided, an additional house is not currently justified based on the labour hours for the existing operation. There is scope within the supplementary guidance for a new house to support a non-farming business. Again, it must be demonstrated that a new house is essential to the continued operation of that. In addition to the 640 hours per annum, the report refers to an extra 640 hours associated with sports horses, bringing the total to 1,280. This is still below the 1,900 hours per annum threshold for a standard man year, making it difficult to justify an additional house to allow an additional worker to live on site, considering there is a property already associated with the business. And turning to the applicant's case, the hours relating to the husbandry with the existing sports horse enterprise have been calculated with industry accepted standards, which account for the time required to manage a sports horse breeding programme. Possibly an underestimate, but the current equestrian business has a labour requirement of 2.33 labour units. This clearly demonstrates the viability of the existing business, which will complement the further agricultural activity to be added once the applicants are resident on the farm. There are currently 13 horses on the farm, and the intention would be to increase numbers again once the applicants are resident on the farm. The equestrian business is a long-established breeding unit producing high-value horses. The labour requirement for the equestrian business covers all duties associated with keeping horses, including mucking out stables, feeding, grooming, administrating veterinary medicines, caring for pregnant mares, delivering foals, handling young stock, breaking and schooling young stock, and taking horses to shows. The vision for the equestrian business is to expand on current numbers and build on the strong reputation for producing high-quality horses. Based on the current and proposed numbers of grassland hectares, livestock for 2025 onwards and the area farmed, the labour requirement calculations demonstrate the need for at least 0.88 labour units which takes the overall labour requirement to 3.21. MPF 4 Policy 17 seeks to encourage, promote and facilitate the delivery of more high quality, affordable and sustainable rural homes in the right locations. Rural homes that support sustainable rural communities and are linked with service provision are to be supported. Development proposals for new homes in rural areas will be supported where the development is suitably scaled, sited and designed to be in keeping with the character of the area, and the development is demonstrated to be necessary to support the sustainable management of a viable rural business or croft, and there is an essential need for a worker, including those taking majority control of a farm business, to live permanently at or near their place of work. In terms of the local development plan, the principle of erecting a house on this site is required to be considered under the terms of Policy 19. This policy allows for the erection of individual houses in the countryside as set out in Section 3 of the LDP2 and the Council's associated supplementary guidance. This proposal can be assessed against the economic activity subcategory 3.3. For a non-farming business where a new house is to be associated with an existing non-farming business, applicants must be able to satisfactorily demonstrate that the provision of a house is essential to the continued operation of the business, and this will normally be through the submission of a business plan prepared by an independent expert, which demonstrates that the business is financially sound and economically viable, that it genuinely contributes to the local economy, and that there is a need for an additional worker to live on the site. The updated agricultural labour requirement report provides confirmation that the management of the existing farm and equestrian business leads to a total of 2.33 labour units, thereby justifying the need for an additional worker's house. This labour unit figure is also considered to be conservative, as it is based on a 40% reduction in the total hours because there are more than 11 horses on the yard, and the figure is also calculated on the basis of 2,400 hours per annum for equestrian use, rather than the standard 1,900 hours per annum for agricultural use. When adding the existing agricultural element of the business, the total labour unit amounts to 3.21. In all cases, applicants are required to demonstrate that the site chosen is the best possible in terms of fit within the landscape and reflecting the traditional pattern and character of the area. When taking these criteria into account, the site chosen for the new house is centrally located within the rural business and immediately adjacent to the other buildings already in the established grouping at Calsiveg. The location for the dwelling is not on prime agricultural land and is considered the best possible option in terms of fit with the overall landscape, and at the same time reflecting the traditional pattern and character of rural buildings and farms estates in the area. By incorporating a traditional approach to the proposed house, design, siting and layout, the development is of high quality. Traditional high quality finishing materials such as stone, natural slate and timber are also proposed. The protection given to the character and amenity of the wider surroundings and the nearest properties, alongside the definition of a proper setting and curtilage for the proposed new property, contributes positively to the quality of the surrounding environment. And in terms of other matters, there are no objections from consultees, and there are no developer obligation requirements. There is also one letter of support. And just to draw to your attention, there was a previous application for a house on a different site here, but still associated with the same business. This was refused and then further dismissed by the LRB in 2016. At that time, the main enterprise on the farm was an equine breeding unit with hay production for home use and sheep which came onto the farm on a grazing contract. The LRB concluded that the development failed to satisfy the test and that the need for a key worker had not been established. And then just to further explain the urban-rural classification there, the site does lie in the accessible rural area, but it is very close to the remote rural area, where other considerations allow for new homes in rural areas, such as the contribution towards local living and economic considerations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move to questions. Councillor Cuthbert.
Yeah, you mentioned the remoteness and you had the colours on the map. Roughly how far is it from that, would you say?
I couldn't give you an exact distance, but it's a couple of fields, I would say. It's, as I say, it is in the accessible area. So, the fact it's not in the remote rural area is clear, but it is close. So I thought it was useful to just point out the proximity of it, but I couldn't give you an exact measurement.
And the second question, this is a farm which is diversified to have equine business as part of the farm. Is that right? Is it different from being a farm? If you see what I mean, if it's just equine, I don't quite understand the distinction.
So I mean, it is a farm, but obviously the owner has diversified from that, so it still does operate as a farm, but the main business, if you like, is the equine side of things. That's the majority of the operation there.
Yeah, my point being that I think we're encouraging farmers to diversify, and this is a form of diversification. The farm still operates as a farm. Is that correct?
Yes, it does.
Councillor Ingleworth.
Yeah, one question, if I may. With your report talked about the number of hours for one worker. In an equine business, work could be a couple of hours in the morning, a couple of hours in the afternoon, a couple of hours in the evening. And that would mean the journey, if it was from outside the farm, there could be a large number of individual journeys. Is that the case?
I think, Councillor Illingworth, because of where the property is located, if you were to be doing those things, you would have to travel, because you can obviously see it's, you know, it's up quite a remote rural road and then up a track to get all the way to the property. That said, there is an existing property on the unit.
I have no questions. So, members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? That is the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor, or do we require more information? Councillor Cuthbert.
I'm happy to progress.
And Councillor Ingleworth.
Happy to proceed.
I too am happy to proceed. So on this occasion, perhaps I'll start us off. With any situation like this is a rural business in a remote area looking to build another property. It really comes down to that part of our supplementary guidance, which is section 3.3, which is economic need. We would normally be looking, I think, for a business plan which indicates the viability of the business to allow us to establish the house there. And that would include, obviously, a need. We have some labour calculations in front of us, but that business plan would normally give us the viability and the need for one extra worker. We don't have that with us today. However, what we have got is a farm which has been in the hands of a family for a number of years, a number of decades, I think is what it actually said. So I think to some extent there is a inherent belief there is a viability in the business, enough for to give me comfort to accept that viability is there. We also have to take into account, of course, that equine business does need somebody on site occasionally to look after the horses on a regular basis. Horses do need some care. They are susceptible sometimes to various illnesses, as I know from my wife's horses. And given the remoteness of the site, to be living off site would be a considerable journey, I think, in and out to help with the horses. Given that circumstance, I feel the inherent viability of the business, the fact that it's equine, I think on this occasion I'm going to be prepared to take a view and grant the appeal on this application with standard conditions as are normal for houses. We'll come back to that perhaps at the end to see how my colleagues feel. So I'll hand over to Councillor Cuthbert, your view.
Thank you, convener. Yes, I mean, the location of this site is very remote, a couple of fields further north, and it might actually not be an issue for them. I don't have a problem with the design of the proposed dwelling house. It looks fine to me for this location. My understanding is that the farm is some 36 hectares and has been running some 35 years under the same family and is viable. My reading of the situation is that the family wish to continue to develop their farming business with the equestrian arm and expanding that. I've noted that the labour requirement for that work would be 2.33 rising to 3.21 labour unit. And one of the issues in my ward, I'm sure many other wards, is that there is increasing problems with theft from farms. So I believe there is a need for a worker on site to keep an eye on the stock. So as such, I recommend approval of this application.
Thank you. And Councillor Ing.
I recommend approval of this application for exactly the same reasons as Councillor Cuthbert and Councillor Bourne. Thank you.
Thank you both. So, Mr. Elliott, we have a unanimous decision to grant the appeal.
Yeah, second. Just to, sorry, convener, just to encapsulate, I think what you've indicated is that you believe from the information before you that it does accord with policy, although it might not have a business plan, that there's enough there for you to accord with policy. You would refer to the viability, you would refer to the need for someone being on site, variety of reasons. That then therefore means you're granting the review subject to possible conditions, etc. You mentioned the contaminated land condition, but I'd bring in Mrs. Tierney as to whether she feels there should be other conditions.
Thanks, Colin. No, I mean, the only thing I noted was in terms of specific conditions that consultees might look for would be the contaminated land assessment and any other standard conditions that would normally go on to a full planning application. Materials, samples, etc. Landscaping details. There may be, we should probably just check for drainage, foul and surface water drainage, in case there's, I can't remember seeing in the papers that there was a drainage report carried out, so I would recommend that.
Just to encapsulate, Commissioner, I think it'll be officers will deal with the conditions as they would normally do, but contaminated land and maybe one or two others have been highlighted.
Thank you for that, and thank you, members. So we'll now move on to the next item on this adjusted agenda. So we're now on to item 4.3, which is the extension to Dwelling House to Mid Lane, Braco and Dunblane. Mrs. Tierney, if you could introduce that one for us.
Thank you, convener. Again, we'll just go through the presentation to start with. So the location of the appeal site in the centre of the village of Braco, there where the yellow star is located. And then zooming in on that, so the house at 2 Mid Lane Close within the yellow circle there, and then the area within the orange oval there is what is now garden ground associated with that property. This is the existing red line site plan that goes with the property. And then zooming in on that, you can see number 2 itself off Mid Lane Close, the garden area, the extended garden area, which has planning permission. And then the 2 areas at the top there off Mans Road are on the top there, a couple of parking spaces that are associated with the property, as well as the 2 that exist beside the house, and those are used by the applicant. The other ones at the bottom there are also some parking spaces, but those are available to anyone. The applicant allows those to be used generally. So turning to the details, so you can see number 2 within the square there is the footprint of the existing house, and the footprint of the extension is the yellow line round about that. And then this is just looking at the red line. So this was effectively what existed previously. You'll notice in the papers there was a previous refusal. So there was the extension around the house at number 2, and then the rest of the land was blue land, but it wasn't really garden ground as such. It was just ground in their ownership. This is the existing elevations along the top there. So the rear and the front elevation with the porch and 2 side elevations. And then the bottom ones there are the, again, the rear elevation on the bottom left, which shows the extension around the back and the side of the property. And then the front with the existing porch being replaced and effectively retained as part of the proposal, and then the extension on the side. And then you can see the main elevation from the side shows the width of the proposed extension. And then this is the proposed footprint of the extension on the ground floor on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side the first floor. And then this is in plan form. So on the left-hand side, the existing footprint, and again you can see the porch within the blue circle at the front there. And then on the right, this is the extent of the extension outlined in red, which wraps around the property and includes the front porch. These are some artist's impressions from the applicant. So, kind of 3D images, I suppose, of the existing house, a couple of the neighbouring properties, and the proposed extension included there. And then some images, some photographs from the site. So on the left-hand side, the front of the house itself, and on the right, you can see the neighbouring property. And then the top left is, as you move around to the other end of Middling Close, and then you can see the other detached house to the side of the appeal site on the bottom. And then this is just to give you bottom right is immediately opposite the appeal site, so that's looking into the back of neighbouring properties. And then on the top left there, you can just see the front porch and the proximity of those properties across the close. And then again, this is just the surrounding area. So as you come into Middling Close, bottom right is to the right-hand side, a mixture of higher density terraced and semi-detached properties. And then as you turn to the left and come into Middling Close, detached properties on this side with the appeal site, just where the yellow arrow is. And then just coming in a bit more closely to the site itself. So this is the end gable of the property with 2 parking spaces to the side and the small fence there that delineates the boundary to the neighbouring property. And this is coming down to the rear. So you can see the rear elevation. And then this is the area of garden space that has permission now. There is quite a change in level between the house and the higher level at Mance Road. So this is as you move up the site towards Mance Road. And then again, just to give you an impression of the other properties. And then the one on the left is the neighbouring property across the parking area. And then this is as you look from the site up towards Mance Road. So on the left-hand side, you can see where the orange arrow is where the parking for the property, the additional parking for the property is located now. And you can see the extent of the area, which has change of use to garden ground now. The orange line is effectively up on Mance Road where the parking area, the general parking area that's open to other users is located. And then as you come up onto Mance Road, you can now see that with the cars in the foreground. The appeal site is where the yellow arrow is down the hill there, and the orange arrow is the dedicated parking for the property. And then, as you can see, the orange line runs along Mance Road, so it's quite an extensive boundary to the property. And then again, where you can see that car, that's at Mance Road level, the additional parking for the property. Then this is looking from where the parking area is up Mans Road, and the orange arrow is where that general area of parking is located. And then these are some overlooks, some path diagrams that were submitted with the application. So the difficult to tell the difference between the roof and the overshadowing because they're the same colour, but where the orange yellow circle is, that would be the overshadowing caused by the proposed extension in the early morning. And then the next one shows where the overshadowing would be midday. And then in the evening, small area to the side and to the front. So the proposal is for an extension to the detached two-storey dwelling house at 2 Mid Lane Close, which wraps around the house at the ground floor level with a single bedroom added on the first floor. The existing front porch and dormers will be replaced. There is an existing parking area for 2 cars at the side of the house over which the extension will be located. Mid Lane Close is a cul-de-sac accessed from Mid Lane, and the density of development in the area is high. This is a resubmission of a previous proposal which was also refused. Apart from minor changes to the roof of the side extension, the proposals remain the same in terms of footprint, scale, form and design. However, one change is that the area of ground to the rear of the house has been granted permission for a change of use to garden ground. The first reason for refusal is that in the interests of residential amenity, the proposals, by reason of their extensive cramped layout, loss of formal parking provision and excessive footprint, would overdevelop the existing dwelling house and original garden ground, resulting in a building density and footprint to plot ratio which is dominant, overbearing and uncharacteristic of the surrounding built environment, to the detriment of established residential amenity levels at the house and immediate environs. Approval would therefore be contrary to policies 14A and 16G of MPF 4, as well as the Council's Placemaking Guide 2020, policies 1A, 1B, brackets A and brackets C, and 17, brackets A and brackets C, and 60B of Perth and Kinross LDP 2, and the National Roads Development Guide 2014, which seek to ensure that residential amenity levels are protected and that the development is compatible with and contributes positively to the quality of the surrounding built environment, respecting the character and amenity of the place in which it is located. Secondly, the development by virtue of the unsympathetic design, disproportionate size and excessive proportions will be poorly related to the host building and will as a result appear disjointed, visually incongruous and out of keeping with the existing house and architectural character of the area. The proposals are therefore contrary to the Council's Placemaking Guide, policies 1A and 1B, parts A, B, C, D and E, and 17C of the Local Development Plan 2, as well as policies 14, brackets A, brackets B and brackets C, and 16G of MPF 4, as the development will not contribute positively to the quality of the surrounding built environment in terms of massing, shape, form, proportions and appearance, nor respect the character and amenity of the place. The assessment by the Planning Service noted that the existing gable of the house is 7.8 metres deep and the length of the extension on this side is 13 metres. The extension includes 2 dormers at first floor level. Although the front porch exists, the wrapping around of the extension on 3 sides is an excessive footprint, 140% more than the existing, and is overdevelopment of the curtilage around the house. A shadow diagram at that stage had not been provided, but there was the noted potential for overshadowing. Notwithstanding the now approved change of use of the garden ground, the extension still results in the driveway at the side of the house being built over, along with most of the original garden area. As such, the proposals will result in a cramped and overdeveloped curtilage around the house, which is out of keeping with the area and detrimental to residential amenity levels. The extra area of garden which now has permission is set at a higher level than the houses on Mid Lane Close, and there will be little in the way of directly accessible or usable space around the house for future services, bin storage or outdoor clothes drying. The extension is inappropriate in scale and of an unsympathetic design, with an excessively wide gable end and with the overall effect being jarring and clumsy. So turning to the applicant's case, The overall site measures 1,740 square metres, of which less than 7% would be built upon, and sufficient garden ground remains at house level, supplemented by the upper garden extension, which ensures generous and usable amenity space well above the original curtilage provision. In terms of parking, 2 off-street spaces are shown within the applicant's control, so the claim of loss of provision is not accurate, and notably precedent also exists at number 4, where reduced parking was accepted. Unlike several neighbouring properties, the proposal also retains side access on both flanks of the house, over 1 metre on the north side and over 1.3 metres on the south side, ensuring circulation, daylight and relief consistent with or better than nearby examples, and accordingly the proposal does not result in dominance, overbearing impacts or harm to amenity. Describing the house as double the width is inaccurate, and the extension is no further forward than the existing building line. The character of Middling Close already reflects varying dwelling sizes and extensions, several of which extend boundaries or present wider elevations than the proposal. Within this evolving context, the proposal sits comfortably and makes a positive contribution to local character. And in terms of other matters, there are no objections and no relevant comments from consultees. And I did note that the comments of roads were not sought, and although the extension does go over the existing 2 spaces, there are 2 replacement spaces within the wider area as a result of that change of use being granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tierney. And we'll move on now to questions. I have a question to start with. The extension will, as I understand, will take most of the existing car parking spaces away. Is that correct? And just leave a small path at the side?
Yes, that's correct. There are 2 spaces at the side of the house and it will cover that.
Councillor Illingworth, any questions?
I've got 2 questions. What is the gap between the end of the extension and the gable of the...
I'm going to say 2 to 3 metres, which would be based on the metre that would be left along the side of the property and the width of a car, which would be the parking space for the neighbouring house.
Okay. There we go. The second question is, does the gable of the neighbouring house have any windows on it?
No, there are no windows on the gable, just the front and rear.
And Councillor Cuthbert?
Yeah, thank you, convener. I'm confused about just exactly what's going to happen with the vehicle. So if the residents go shopping, can they park out at the front of the house once this has been constructed, or is there space on the road? I couldn't really make out from the drawings whether that was possible.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. There would be no dedicated parking private to the dwelling house because that will obviously be built over as part of the proposals. They do have 2 parking spaces that will be available, but they're up the hill at Mance Road. You would be able to park on Mid-Close outside the property, but that's obviously the public road. But it's available.
Yeah, I couldn't tell from the photograph just how much space there was on the other side, and the sort of 3D images that we've been given don't make clear what is actually road and what is buildings and so on. Roughly how far is it from the house to the 2 spaces that are on Mance Road? And any idea roughly of the elevation? Is it like 20 feet walk up?
I've got my scale rule with me. I'm estimating. So they are probably about the width, the distance again of the width of the plot. So meters, if I was to estimate in meters, ten 10, 12 metres up the hill. They're about.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I did actually have one other question. Sorry, Mrs. Journey, it just came back to me. Previous application, the planning officer said that the extension is very similar. But the real difference is the existence now of this garden ground. I mean, is that make a material difference to this? I know it was already there. There's now a change of use. It was already under the ownership of the applicant, but it's now a class of the garden ground. Does that make a material difference here?
Thank you, convener. The fundamental issue that the planning service have is the scale and design of the proposed extension. The change of use to the garden ground, which now has permission, doesn't change that. The planning service were also concerned that the footprint of the proposed extension pretty much took up all of the available space around about the house at the level of the house. You know, that remains the same. The only thing that's material now is that there is additional garden ground that they have got that they can use. I think the planning service would still say, yes, but it's not immediately at the back door of the house and it's up the hill. So it's not as usable, perhaps.
Thank you for that. So, members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? That is, the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor. Or do we require more information? Councillor Cuthbert?
Happy to proceed.
Councillor Illingworth?
Happy to proceed.
I'm happy to proceed. So, Councillor Cuthbert, if you could start us off on this one.
Yeah, I find this really difficult, actually. In principle, this comes down to the sort of placemaking and the design, and it's subjective and so on. And looking at the buildings in the immediate area, there's all sorts of different pitches to roofs, there's all sorts of different design styles and so on. So in principle, I don't think that's a particular reason for refusal. I am struggling with the fact that you can't really access the back garden and the kitchen without sort of going down a 1 metre wide passageway. And if you need to take anything into the back garden like a digger, you're not going to be able to do it. So I'm struggling on that. But on reflection, I think I'm willing to approve this application. I think it doesn't fill me with joy, but I don't think there's enough reason to refuse it.
Thank you. Councillor Illingworth?
I'm happy to grant the application for exactly the same reasons as Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you both. So my decision is now going to be academic, but I'm afraid I was going to go slightly different. It is very similar to a previous application. In looking at the plans, which are in front of us here, I would say that from my view of it, the extension does effectively swallow up the original house, takes over the whole thing, which I think is not going with our own guidance. But I understand your points of view. But in this instance, my view would have been to refuse the appeal. I accept the garden ground. The argument about the cars, I don't think is really there. It's the applicant who decides where he parks his car. It may affect the saleability of the property in due course, but that's down to them. So I have no problem with that. My feeling was just that purely the size of the extension overwhelms the existing house and would look out of character. So my decision would have been to refuse, but I accept I'm now in the minority. So, Mr. Elliott, we are on a 2-to-1 majority on this one.
Yes, thanks, Convener. I think by 2-to-1 majority, that's to grant the review subject to suitable conditions and informatives. Obviously, Convener, you dissent from that in the case you've gone with the planning officer's reason. And just the two that have gone for grant, I've got you that on balance you think it accords with the development plan, is my understanding of what you've said. Yes, I'm now turning over to Mrs. Tini. I didn't note anything specific in terms of conditions. I think it was just standard conditions that we'll deal with later. Yes, okay.
Thank you very much. That's your application has been approved. So, Councillor Cuthbert, that's the end of your involvement with this one today. Thank you very much for coming with us and helping out. If somebody can ask Councillor Allen to return to us, we'll have a quick recess while we get him back in a couple of minutes. He's in the chambers room. Fine, well now, hold on while the computer's put on. Paper's much easier. You ready? Right. Okay, members, we'll now revert back to the original order of the agenda. So we're now looking at item 4.1. This is a change of use of a flat to short-term let accommodation unit, 6A Priory Place in Perth. And Mrs. Tierney, if you could introduce this one.
Thank you, convener. So location of the appeal site here, where the yellow star is located, quite central within Perth itself. You can see the railway station there to the north and South Inch to the east there. And then zooming in on the property, so Priory Place itself to the east side. So its property there is highlighted with the yellow circle. And then there's Croft Park round to the rear or the residential area there. So the plans that were submitted with the application, so the red line application site boundary around the property, so that includes the parking space at the front and the garden area associated with it. And then just zooming in a bit more closely on that so you can see that. And then the floor plan of the property there, so two-bedroom flat with a entrance door into the property and a door that also leads out onto the private garden at the rear. And then these are images of the property. So four flats in this block. So you can see the two windows, the off-street parking there off Priory Place, and the door on the right-hand side that leads into the property. And then from the other direction. And then this left-hand side is the parking area, off-street parking area at the front, and then the pavement and the road, and then just looking from the side of the property back out onto the main road. Front door of the property, and then as you come round the side, obviously you can see the fence that demarcates between the neighbouring property as well, but the path that leads around to the back of the property and the other flat upstairs. And there you can see the steps that take you up to that property, and then you can start to see the garden areas at the rear and some of the other residential properties at the rear. And then this is looking back at the building, so you can see on the ground floor there with the door that leads out into the garden area. And then the right-hand image is which shows the extent of the ground floor of the property. And then that gate there leads into the garden area. Then this is just to kind of show the demarcation of the properties. Left-hand side is the neighbouring properties. The middle there is the garden that goes with the upper flat, and then the right-hand side is the garden that goes with the appeal site. And then as you turn and look towards it again, the garden area is in behind that fence. And then this is looking from the other side of the block as you come round and look back towards where the garden is, and then a kind of distant view from the lane, pedestrian lane that runs around the back. And then this, again, just some distant views from the surrounding residential areas. And then this is for your further information. This is the local development plan settlement extract for Perth South. So you can see the location of the appeal site is within that red circle there. So obviously there's a lot of various uses within the central area of Perth there that you can see top right. But very clearly this area lies within a wholly residential area as defined in the local plan. So yeah, introduction wise, property is a 2-bedroom ground floor flat located within a 4-in-a-block property in the residential neighbourhood of Craigie. The property is accessed through its own private entrance door and has an enclosed garden at the rear. It can also be accessed along a shared path to the side of the property, which is also used to access the upper floor flat, and then through a gate at the rear into the garden area where a door also leads into the property, and there's one off-street parking space at the front. The reasons for refusal, firstly, that the proposed change of use is contrary to MPF 4 Policy 30EI tourism, as the proposal will result in an unacceptable impact on local amenity and character of the area. The proposal will result in the loss of a 2-bedroom flat short-term let accommodation in an established residential area close to the city centre. The contribution to the local economy from one property in use as a short-term let would be limited. The loss of a 2-bedroom residential flat is not outweighed by demonstrable local economic benefits, and the proposal is therefore does not comply with MPF 4 Policy 30E2. And secondly, the proposal is contrary to MPF 4 Policy 14C, Design Quality and Place, and LDP 2 Policy 1A, Placemaking, and Policy 17, Residential Areas, and the Council's non-statutory planning guidance on short-term lets, as the short-term let accommodation would adversely impact on the amenity of residents and is not compatible with the amenity and character of the established surrounding residential area. The assessment by the Planning Service, firstly in principle, MPF 4 Policy 30E Tourism states that development proposals for the reuse of existing buildings for short-term let holiday letting will not be supported where the proposal will result in an unacceptable impact on local amenity or the character of a neighbourhood, or the loss of residential accommodation where such loss is not outweighed by demonstrable local economic benefits. In respect of criteria 1, the short-term let use and movement through the turnover of guests will have a detrimental effect on existing residents and an associated adverse impact on the safety and perceived safety of those residents. These safety issues would be exacerbated by the intensification of the proposed short-term let use. The flatted development is private residential in nature, and the introduction of short-term let use could erode that residential character and amenity on a cumulative basis. The short-term let use is incompatible with the residential block of 4 flats and the established residential nature of the immediate surroundings. Whilst it's acknowledged the Craigie Neighbourhood Centre is in close proximity, this section of Priory Place is predominantly residential in character. In respect of criteria 2, the proposal has resulted in the loss of a 2-bedroom flat to short-term let accommodation in an established residential area close to the city centre. The contribution to the local economy from one property in use as a short-term let would be limited. The loss of this is not outweighed by demonstrable local economic benefits. And then turning to residential amenity, MPF 4 Policy 14, Design Quality and Place, and LDP 2 Policy 1A, Placemaking, and Policy 17, Residential Areas, support proposals which are compatible with the amenity and character of the surrounding area. The ground floor flat is one of 4 flats in a 2-storey block. There is the potential for noise from the users of the property to affect neighbouring residential properties. The intensification of use and movements would adversely impact the amenity of neighbouring residents and would alter the private residential character of the flatted block and the surrounding area. Any measures put in place to manage and control bookings would not guarantee to stop or prevent antisocial or noisy behaviour occurring or from impacting adversely on the amenity of neighbouring residents. These matters could not easily be controlled by planning conditions. And then turning to the applicant's case, the site is located in the city of Perth, where guests can access a range of local amenities, including bars, barbers, takeaways and beauty shops just minutes away. It is approximately 0.4 miles from Perth bus and train stations. The close proximity of public transport to the site significantly reduces the requirement for guest vehicles. This unit is located on the ground floor with its own private main entrance door and its own parking space to the front. The private garden is fully enclosed and accessed via a private door from the kitchen into this area, and there are no shared or communal accesses. The character of the area is not exclusively residential, and the introduction of one small short-term let would not materially alter the established character of the area. The property sits on a busy road, Priory Lane, which is the main link road from the Craigie area, so the street already experiences high vehicular and pedestrian movements associated with the nearby Craigie neighbourhood centre. In this context, the limited additional movement generated by short-term let guests would not materially alter the character of the area or adversely affect the amenity of neighbouring properties. In this context, the limited additional movement generated by short-term let guests, with a maximum of 4 at any one time, would not alter the character of the area. The property will be aimed at tourists and working professionals that have requirements to work away from home. Housing strategy data submitted in application 23-01028 records the saturation level of short-term lets in the PH2 postcode as 1.1%. Housing strategy stated this is below the level at which it would affect the availability of residential housing stock or the character of a neighbourhood. It is considered the proposal successfully ties in with relevant planning policy whilst providing a sustainable function going forward that can contribute to Perth's important tourist economy and reputation as a food, drink, creative and cultural destination. Finally, the applicant refers to 2 other cases where STLs have been approved, one by the Planning Authority at 60 Abbott Street and one by the LRB at 81 Balhousie Street. The first case was approved on the basis the area was mixed use with a variety of commercial properties, including a pub and a laundry nearby with associated noise and activity. The second was an upheld appeal by the LRB on the basis that although the property was in a residential area, the property had its own front door, 2 parking spaces and was close to amenities. And in terms of other matters, there isn't a roads consultation, but planning do note that there are no parking concerns in this location and there is access to public transport options with a number of bus stops and Perth train station in close proximity. A licence to operate this property as an STL was granted in September last year, and some of the representations refer to the fact it's already operating. So I would suggest what we're actually looking at here is a retrospective proposal. There's no objection from environmental health, and the other matters raised in the objections include that this is a residential area. It's not the centre of Perth. It's a quiet residential suburb, especially in the evenings and weekends. This would result in the loss of residential accommodation in a predominantly residential area. It's out of character with the area, and the impact on residential amenity, including use of a shared access, noise disturbance, security and safety risks, and potential waste management issues. And then just as a reminder, in terms of the non-statutory planning guidance for STLs, which acknowledges that while short-term lets can bring economic benefits to the host and local areas, this must be balanced against the impact the loss of that residential property has on the availability of housing for local people, and in particular access to affordable housing. The Council wishes to support a sustainable visitor economy and therefore recognises the importance of addressing the short-term let issue whilst also encouraging the development of appropriate located hotels, guest houses and bespoke self-catering units that do not erode local housing availability. The guidance outlines matters to be considered in the assessment of an application, including whether the property is within a predominantly residential area and there could be adverse impacts on amenity for existing residents, particularly in blocks with shared and communal entry. And then, as already highlighted, the proposed use is incompatible with the residential character of Craigie the movement of guests could erode residential amenity on a cumulative basis. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to questions. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, convener. Are we aware, are there any other short-term lets in this immediate vicinity?
Afraid I don't know the answer to that, Councillor Allen.
Councillor Illingworth.
I have no questions.
Just to clarify, Mr. Tierney, there's reference made to two other cases. One in Abbott Street, I believe, which we said was in a commercial area, on the border of a commercial area, and I believe the one mentioned at Balhousie was close by to a shop or multi-use shop. Is that correct?
I'm not aware of the exact details of the one at Abbott Street, but that was obviously approved by the planning authority and on the basis that it was a more mixed area. The one that the LRB considered at Balhousie Street was, as in this case, a residential area. But obviously the LRB is entitled to, take a view on that. And in that case, there was commercial, a shop nearby.
That's all the questions I have. So members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us, that is the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor, or do we require more information? Councillor Allen?
I'm happy to proceed.
And Councillor Illingworth?
Happy to proceed.
I too am happy to proceed, and I will start us off on this one. When we're looking at the short-term lets, the core of the decision must come down to residential amenity. That's the core of it all, and how it affects other people in the area. In this instance, we've got obviously 3 other flats in effect with the block, which is obviously converted semi-detached houses. We also have to take into account, I think, the people who live nearby, because it's quite a close environment there. We know that the movement of people in short-term lets does cause the intensification of pressure on people. We've had, obviously, in the background in the past, an appeal to the DPEA regarding a property in Burnham, which I believe from memory was a flat with a separate entrance in that case. So the overriding factor, as I say, is the amenity of people who live nearby. Now, in this instance, obviously there's the flat above, there's 2 to the side, there's another house nearby. Moving of people is always going to be a problem. People coming and going, unloading luggage, reloading luggage. I appreciate that the applicant says he would be managing the property, but the fact the property is managed, again, in the past has not been satisfactory proof that we can avoid any problems. Given the circumstances of this one and the fact that it is predominantly a residential area, and this would introduce a commercial element into that area, my thoughts are based upon the effect it will have on residential amenity, other people living nearby, that I am going to refuse the appeal on this case. And that is my decision. Councillor Allen. Thank
you, convener. Given consideration to all that was given here on both sides, to protect the sanctity of the residential space, and it is predominantly residential, I'm similarly minded to the convener. I did actually take full cognizance of the applicant's points about the close proximity of public transport to the site, which reduces the requirement for guest vehicles. Unfortunately, we are a very lazy society, and I don't think anybody will come in without a car or 2. Thank you.
Councillor Illingworth.
I'm not going to agree with my colleagues. Having actually lived on Priory Place, it is a very, very noisy street. I do not think there will be a substantial reduction in residential amenity if a short-term let is put in there. So I would grant the appeal, but obviously I'm outvoted, so thank you.
So, Mr. Elliott, we have a 2-to-1 majority again on this one.
Yes, thank you, Convener. Writing that down. So it's 2-1 majority, 2 wish to refuse, and I'll take you on to the grounds of refusal in a second. But obviously, Councillor Illingworth dissenting and saying you wish to grant, presumably on the basis that you consider it accords with the development plan. So we'll take Councillor Allen and yourself, Convener, to page 33 of the papers, which are the grounds of refusal. You've not indicated any change to that. Are you wishing any change to the grounds?
No, I just think there should perhaps be a bit of an explanation of, more of an explanation on the reasons. My thought of wording would be something along the lines of use as a short-term let would be an intensification of use in a 4-in-1 block property with only one parking space within a shared access and all with neighbouring residential properties immediately close by. I think it gives an explanation of the reasons for refusal which the planning officer put in there.
You agree, Councillor Allen? Just to add in, Convener, I think where that would be positioned in ground number 1, that relates to the very first part of ground 1. So that would be at the end of the sentence, impact on local amenity and character of the area. That your wording would be inserted there.
Yeah.
In terms of ground 2, which is more general placemaking, etc. Policy 17, I think that would come at the very end of that reason for refusal. I think that would be the position.
Thank you.
For both grounds of refusal.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. So members will now move on to. Yes, I'm sorry. Did you want to stay, or did, I mean, you're more than welcome to enjoy the proceedings. I'm sure. We're desperate for an audience sometimes. So members will now move on. Since we've lost our audience now, we'll move on to item 4.4. Which is the alterations, installation of replacement windows and doors, installation of air source heat pump and solar panels, formation of entrance ports at 2 The Cross, McClure. Mrs. Tierney, if you could introduce this one for us.
Thank you, Convener. Again, we'll just run through the presentation first. McClure itself and the location of the appeal site there in the centre with the yellow star. And then zooming in on that, the property within the yellow oval there. And then these are the plans submitted with the application. So the red line site boundary, demarcating the site. And then zooming in on that, the existing roof plan of the property and boundary. And then on the right, the proposed roof plan, which shows the solar panels on the rear and the porch area to the rear as well. And then we have the elevations. So on the top, the existing elevation of the property, the 3 existing windows to the front there, and then on the bottom, the proposed windows. The difference with these being the style of the windows. The 6-pane split on the top, casement style on the bottom, the 4-pane split. And then moving around towards the rear of the property, again replacing the window on the back of the original part of the building, and the replacement of the French doors on the rear of the property, and then the proposed solar panels on the back of the roof. And then this is the side of the property. So the gable on the left is the original part of the dwelling house, the extended part at the rear with the window to be replaced, and then the existing door in between the two, and the proposed porch on the bottom, shown by that area in yellow at the bottom, and the air source heat pump. And then this is the other side of the property with the replacement window. And then this is the window details of the existing windows on the property. I'll come into a bit more detail about those in the presentation, and then the proposed windows and door. And then these are the photographs from the site. So looking across the main road to the property, where the yellow arrow is. And then just to give you the surrounding context, with McClure being a conservation area, so the main road, cross, and the other properties to the north side. And then as you come round to look towards the appeal site, there you can start to see it coming into view the right-hand side. And then this is looking across the road at it now, and the entrance into the neighbouring more modern residential development. And then looking more closely at the front elevation of the property, the 3 windows to be replaced there, and the access to the side round the back. And then looking more closely at the existing timber windows at the front of the property. And then moving around towards the rear, so you can see the extended area at the back, the windows, the existing windows, and the existing door. And then looking at the existing windows on the back of the original part of the property, the door that exists to be replaced in between the original on the left-hand side with the stonework and the later extension with the harling. And then just looking back at the property, and then the other windows on the right-hand side on the extended part of the house. And then this is just a photo on the left of the more distant view of the back of the house. So this is the extended bit. You can't really see the original part from the rear garden, but on the right-hand side, this photo is taken from the neighbouring residential development, so a kind of distant view where you can see the property and the roofs. So the appeal site here is a traditional single-storey detached house within the McClure Conservation Area, and it is Category C listed. The original building has been previously extended on its south side and east elevations. The full planning application sought to install replacement windows and doors, install solar panels on the south and east facing roof planes, install an air source heat pump on the south elevation, erect an entrance porch on the south elevation, and install vents on the north elevation. The associated application for listed building consent was also refused by the planning service, and an appeal was submitted to the DPEA against this refusal, and that appeal was dismissed by the reporter at the end of January. And I'll come back to the reasoning for the dismissal after I've presented the other information. So firstly, the reasons for refusal relate to that the proposed replacement windows, by virtue of their opening method, glazing layout, applied astragals, frame material and triple glazing, the proposed solar panels by virtue of their visually prominent siting, modern design and materials and total surface area, and the proposed porch by virtue of its roof sitting above the existing eaves and the extent of the original external stonework that would be covered, would have a detrimental impact on the character and special interest of the Category C listed building, and approval would therefore be contrary to Section 59 of Planning and Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Scotland Act 1997, which requires planning authorities to have special regard to the desirability of preserving the listed building, its setting, and any features of special architectural or historic interest which it possesses, contrary to Policy 7C, Historic Assets and Places, Listed Buildings of MPF 4, and contrary to Policy 27A, Listed Buildings of the Perth and Kinross LDP 2. The proposed replacement windows, secondly, the proposed replacement windows by virtue of their opening method glazing layout, applied astragals, frame material and triple glazing, and the proposed solar panels, by virtue of their visually prominent siting, modern design and materials, and total surface area, would have a detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the McClure Conservation Area. Approval would therefore be contrary to Section 64 of the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act Scotland 1997, which requires planning authorities to pay special attention to the desirability of preserving or enhancing the character and appearance of conservation areas, contrary to Policy 7D, Historic Assets and Places, Conservation Areas of MPF4, and contrary to Policy 28A, Conservation Areas of the Perth and Kinross LDP2. Thirdly, the proposed replacement windows, by virtue of their opening method, glazing layout, applied astragals, frame material and triple glazing. The proposed solar panels, by virtue of their visually prominent siting, modern design and materials, and total surface area, and the proposed porch, by virtue of its roof sitting above the existing eaves and the extent of the original external stonework that would be covered, would have a detrimental impact on the character and environmental quality of the application property and the surrounding area. And approval would therefore be contrary to Policy 16G1, Quality Homes of MPF4, contrary to Policies 1A and 1B (C), Placemaking of the Perth and Kinross LDP2, and contrary to the Perth and Kinross Placemaking Supplementary Guidance 2020. Fourthly, the proposal, by virtue of the detrimental impacts of the solar panels on the character and special interest of the Category C listed building, on the character and appearance of the McClure Conservation Area, and on the character and environmental quality of the appeal property and the surrounding area, would result in the installation of a source of renewable energy that would have an unacceptable impact on the historic environment and on visual amenity. And approval would therefore be contrary to Policy 11E, Energy of MPF4, and contrary to Policy 33A, New Proposals for Renewable and Low Carbon Energy of the Perth and Kinross LDP2. And finally, the application, due to the lack of a BAT survey, fails to demonstrate that bats will not be affected by the proposal, and approval would therefore be contrary to Policy 4F, Natural Places, Protected Species of MPF4, and contrary to Policy 41, Biodiversity of the Perth and Kinross LDP2. So turning to the specific assessment by the Planning Service of each of the elements, firstly the replacement windows. The building's principal elevation originally had 3-pane side-hung pairs of casement windows. The existing windows replicate the original windows in terms of the timber frames, opening methods and glazing layout. The proposed windows are tilt and turn windows that fail to replicate the original opening method. On the principal elevation, each window is to be a single tilt and turn window as opposed to the existing pairs of casement windows. Astragals are to be applied to the glass in the windows. However, to be acceptable, the astragals would need to be structural. On the principal elevation, the proposed windows are to have 1 horizontal astragal, whilst the original and existing windows have 2 horizontal astragals. The proposed windows are to have aluminium face timber frames. This is not acceptable. And the windows are to be triple glazed, which would result in overly deep frames. Slim cavity double glazing would have been preferable. Due to their opening method, glazing layout, applied astragals, frame material and triple glazing, the proposed replacement windows have a detrimental impact on the character and special interest of the C-listed building. With regard to the replacement doors, the proposed glazed doors in the east elevation are also to have applied astragals, aluminium face timber frames and triple glazing. As these doors are on the rear elevation of a later extension, their replacement is less of a concern. However, they should still be appropriate for a listed building in a conservation area. It is also proposed to replace the entrance door on the south elevation. From the details provided, the existing door does not appear to be historic. Whilst the proposed door has a traditional design, details of the materials to be used have not been provided. If the application was not being refused, additional details about the existing door and the installation of a timber door without aluminium facing would have been sought. With regard to the proposed solar panels, these are to be installed on the south and east facing roof planes. Although these are the side and rear elevations, due to the height of the roof, they would be visible from adjacent streets. The modern design, size, number and materials of the solar panels would be an incongruous addition to the traditional slate roofs of the building. The proposed air source heat pump is relatively modest in scale, and it has to be installed and it is to be installed on one of the later extensions to the original building. The proposed porch is to be erected on the south elevation, where the later extension joins the rear of the original building. Porch's flat roof would sit above the eaves of the existing house, resulting in the flat roof cutting into the slate roof on the rear of the original building. Although part of the stone wall to the rear of the house remains visible, due to its height and depth, the porch would cover half of the original external stonework. And although the porch has a relatively simple modern design, its height and depth mean that it would have a detrimental impact. Turning to the applicant's case, the grounds for appeal are procedural unfairness, misapplication of policy and guidance, overstated and unsubstantiated harm, failure to consider reasonable alternatives, mischaracterization of impact, material considerations ignored, lack of engagement, and examples given to illustrate these points include. With regard to the BAT survey, it is unreasonable to refuse the application on the basis of information the authority chose not to request. The applicant is an ecology ranger and has installed a number of BAT boxes around the property. The report acknowledges that a condition report for the windows was submitted, yet simultaneously claims the application lacked justification for their replacement. The report accepts compliance with MPF 4 Policy 2 and 16, but dismisses these as insufficient in light of heritage concerns, when MPF 4 requires a balanced and integrated approach to decision making, not a hierarchy where heritage overrides climate and energy objectives. While the Historic Environment Policy for Scotland and the Managing Change Guidance Notes are listed, their substance is not applied. For example, replacement windows are allowed where originals are not present and where design is sympathetic, and solar panels are acceptable where impacts are reversible and limited. It is conceded that the windows are unlikely to be original and make a limited contribution to the character of the conservation area. Later windows of non-traditional design do not make an impact on overall character. A condition could be used to ensure appropriately styled and constructed windows. A preference for slim double glazing over triple glazing is unsound. The porch is proposed within an area of the property that has already been altered and does not represent intact historic fabric. The impact of the porch sitting about the existing eaves is misunderstood. Any functional porch structure must necessarily rise above the eaves to provide usable headroom and weather protection. The energy consumption and cost of running the property currently have been dismissed as irrelevant factors, and there are no public representations. In terms of other matters, the conservation team raised concerns about the proposals and that they would be detrimental to the special architectural and historic interest of the listed building, and that there was insufficient justification for the replacement of the windows. And environmental health required a condition to control noise from the proposed air source heat pump in the event of approval being granted. Now it's relevant to turn to the DPA appeal, the appeal decision for the associated listed building consent. Just to explain the decision that the reporter came to in terms of the elements proposed. So firstly, in terms of the windows and doors, the reporter agreed that the existing windows are unlikely to be originals. However, they are timber clad and appear to broadly replicate the originals in terms of their overall appearance. While some of the windows are in poor condition, they make a positive contribution to the external appearance of the property and to the wider conservation area. Those proposed would be both aluminium faced and triple glazed. Non-structural stick-on astragals would also be applied to the new windows. They differ in terms of their design and appearance, with particular regard to the 3 windows located on the principal elevation of the property and which are clearly visible from public viewpoints on Old Military Road, which constitutes the main public route through the conservation area. While the principle of replacing the windows is acceptable given the poor condition of the current ones, the proposed use of aluminium triple glazing and the difference in astragal positions and sizes would not appropriately replicate the special architectural features of the listed building and would have a significant adverse impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area. The replacement doors on the east elevation with triple glazing and aluminium facing with applied astragals would have a notably different appearance to the existing doors. While not located on the principal elevation, they would not appropriately replicate the special architectural features of the listed building, with particular regard to the finishing materials proposed. With regard to the porch, this is at the intersection of the original dwelling house and the later projection to the east. Due to its height relative to the roof of the original house, this would intersect with the original slate roof. So while the proposed porch would not be visible from elsewhere within the conservation area, it would adversely impact on a feature of historic interest of the listed building. With regard to the solar panels and air source heat pump, while the proposed heat pump would indeed be small in terms of scale and would have limited impact on the historic fabric, the proposed solar panels would impact on the traditional slate roof of the original house and would also be visible from the surrounding conservation area. In particular, the solar panels proposed on the south-facing roof plane would be clearly visible from public viewpoints on Old Military Road. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We'll go to questions. Councillor Illingworth.
I have no question, thank you.
I also have no questions. Thank you.
I just have to clarify one point. I think the report is actually partially there. The windows that are now in situ were put in, I think the agent actually mentions 1995, what, 31 years? But they now effectively, I know he's queried the fact they're not the originals, but they've been in the window in that particular building for so many years, 31 years. Are they now de facto the windows on which to model any future change? Would that be right? Because of the time they've been in situ.
What's the exact question, convener? Sorry, I'm struggling.
I'm saying that these are not the original windows. I think we'll seem to accept that. But these windows that exist now have been in place for 31 years, according to the agent. He talks about 1995. So are we effectively saying they are now, because they've been there so long, they are now effectively the original windows on which to base future designs on?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think the windows that have been installed appear to be a fair reflection of the original windows in terms of their style. So in theory, what you're trying to do is replicate what's there now and the originals, because you know the condition of the condition of the windows that are there at the moment is not really in question. I think everybody accepts that they could be replaced. It's the style and the nature of the windows that are proposed that is the issue. But the style of the windows that are in there at the moment do reflect the originals.
So any future replacement should reflect that. That's the style as your basis for your design, effectively.
Yes.
Well, thank you for that. Sorry to put you on the spot there. Right, members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? That is, the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor, or do we require more information? Councillor Illingworth?
Happy to proceed.
Councillor Allen?
Happy to proceed.
I too am happy to proceed. Just to remind members that obviously our deliberations here are based upon the planning application. The listed building consent has already been refused, appealed and refused again. So we can't involve ourselves on that. So Councillor Allen, start us off.
Thank you, convener. Given the reporting from the officers and their decisions, I really don't have far to go with this. We talk about conservation areas, amenity to visual impact. Have some sympathy with people in these houses who want to look at heat and insulation and modern green measures. However, on this occasion, I have to side with the planning and refuse the application. Thank you.
And Councillor Illingworth.
I too would like to refuse the application for exact same reasons as Councillor Allen.
Thank you. As with Councillor Allen, I have a certain sympathy with people who are living in houses in conservation areas, and if additionally they are listed. And as much that on one side they're in a conservation area, they're in a listed building, on the other side they want to modernise it to save energy, or same costs, whatever. It seems that one half is at loggerheads with the other at the moment, but we are where we are. Looking at all the practicalities, I went to visit the property myself, and some of the points made by the agent the fact that you won't see the solar panels because of the high hedge. I'm afraid I stood there and looked at the various angles. You will see the solar panels. They obviously would stand out. Porch, same problems. The air source heat pump probably is not such a big concern. Given the circumstances in this situation, I think, again, with my colleagues, I'm going to have to refuse the appeal. I don't think there's anywhere much to go here. The only thing I would say is perhaps if the windows were put forward with a design which emulates what's already there, timber framed, there may be some scope to move there, which might help some of the insulation and energy efficiency of the building in a future date. But as we stand at the moment, I'm refusing the appeal. Mr. Elliott, we have a unanimous decision on that one.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, unanimously refused, and I've understood it's in line with the grounds of refusal picture on page 267 and 268 of your papers. Okay.
Thank you. Now, before we move on to the last item on the agenda, members, you will have read some of the paperwork within the pack, specifically to do with a report issued by the Conservation Officer and the subsequent reply by the agent to those points. And you will have noted, I think, already that one of the comments in that reply was, quite frankly, abusive and totally unnecessary. The agent we must regard as a professional architect, and his professionalism is not in question, but likewise our officers are professional as well. Planning is emotive. It can be very frustrating, I'm sure, for applicants and agents, but that is no excuse for the appalling language that's in this report. It's abusive, it's unnecessary. I'm sure it's quite upsetting for the officer, totally unnecessary. Now, what happens now, I don't know, but I am going to ask the clerk of the LRB to look into this because I think that sort of language is totally unacceptable in this day and age. I have nothing more to say on it other than that. I hope that we will never see a repetition of that in the course of our deliberations in the future. Thank you, members. We'll now move on to the final paper today, which is item 4.5. And this is to do with an erection of a place of worship, class 10, and formation of car park and associated works, land 25 metres north of 59 King Street in Crieff. Mrs. Gioni, if you could introduce this one for us.
Thank you, Convener. So, yes, the appeal site in the centre of Crieff there, just off the crossroads of Commissioner Street and King Street. And then as we zoom in to the appeal site, you can see the crossroads of the two roads there and the appeal site highlighted, the edge of it there in yellow. And then the red line site boundary, location plan and site plan submitted with the application. So kind of an L shape that demarcates the existing site and car parking. And then look in a bit more detail at the proposed plan for the site along the top there, parallel to Commissioner Street, the building itself, an area of green space nearer to King Street, and then the parking running at 90 degrees down the other side of the site. And then these are some sections through the site. So the top image there is from Commissioner Street, looking at the building there just on the left-hand side, and the access into the property, the vehicular access to the car park. And then I suppose the bottom image there gives you the difference in level from Commissioner Street down to the rear. And then these are the elevations of the proposed church, place of worship proposed. And the floor plan and the roof plan. So obviously, the main hall area and some toilets and kitchen facilities. And then these are some 3D images from the applicant. This is a sketch that was within their paperwork, which show the gable end of the existing neighbouring building on King Street, and the existing flats on the other side, the rear. This is also within the applicant's paperwork, so this was included by them to demonstrate an example of a recently completed similar development, Kingdom Hall building. This is the entrance to the building. And then for information, this is again from the local plan. This time we have Beef, the dotted blue line being the edge of the conservation area, the yellow area in the middle there being the main town and neighbourhood centre, the main commercial area. And you can see the location of the appeal site within the red circle lies within the conservation area and the town and neighbourhood centre. And then some images of the site. So the this is taken from the car park, I suppose. So as you look up the pedestrian access there between the site and the neighbouring buildings, the building would be located at the top of the hill there where the yellow arrow is. And then this is the existing footpath right of way. Car park would be on the left hand side, building would be on the right hand side in both those images. And this is the bottom of the application site on the left hand side. Trees at the bottom there. And then this is looking back towards the car park from the bottom of the site on the right hand side. And then this is as you move up through the site towards Commissioner Street. So you can see again the car parking area on the left, and then where the building would be located on the right. And then the right hand image is the backs, the rears of the existing properties. And then again, as you move up through the site towards Commissioner Street, the car parking area on the left, and the location of where the building would be located on the right. And then again, coming up even closer to Commissioner Street, the proposed access into the site and car park where the orange arrow is, and then the building looking back down towards the, the car park again, looking back down towards the co-op. And then this is the boundary with the neighbouring residential properties and where the car park would be located. This is looking across to the application site along Commissioner Street towards King Street. So you can see the current condition of the site. This is really at the point of the vehicular access into the property. So this would be looking west, so you can see the nature of the and style of the surrounding properties. Directly across the road, across Commissioner Street to buildings on the north side. And then this is looking from the other side of the road back across to the appeal site. And then this is more closely looking at the appeal site itself. You can see the edge and then the footpath that runs along the road. The left image is the entrance into the site and the car park, and the right again just gives you an impression of the edge of the footway and the road. And then we come to the main crossroads and junction of Commissioner Street and King Street. So the image on the left are the two buildings up the hill, and on the right, is the other corner, the opposite corner. Thank you. And then an image that tries to capture all three of those properties on that crossroads. And then again, just another couple of images from King Street across the application site. And then this was the best image I could find of the hotel, sorry, that used to occupy the Strathearn Hotel, now demolished, obviously. Yeah, so so obviously, as you're aware, this application was not determined by the planning service. It was therefore not refused. This is an appeal against non-determination of the application within the statutory timescales, which are set under the terms of the Planning, etc. Scotland Act. So whereas a report of handling is normally provided in refusing an application, but effectively the procedure entails the provision of a report by the planning authority in response to the appeal, which is in your papers, but I will take some time to go through that. The proposal is for a new place of worship on the site of the former Strathearn Hotel in Crieff. The site is vacant as a result of the former hotel being demolished due to health and safety concerns. The site is effectively the fourth corner of 4 at the crossroads of Commissioner Street and King Street. It is a prominent site in the centre of the town and also lies within the conservation area. The Crossroads Junction is referred to in the conservation area appraisal. The buildings on each of the other 3 corners are all listed buildings bespoke for their location, including the B-listed 3-storey Queen Anne building at 49 to 57 King Street, the B-listed 3-storey shop and tenement building at 60 to 62 King Street, and the C-listed 3-storey corner shop and tenement building at 62 to 68. Individually, they are important, but collectively they contribute positively to the existing character and appearance of the conservation area. The buildings all sit directly at the back of the pavement and have prominent corner architectural elements and corner entrances. The proposal is to erect a modern single-storey church building with associated parking and landscaping. The roof is shallow pitched with modern roof tiles. The walls are white render with some cement render features, and the windows are aluminium. So the reasons given by the planning authority, they said they would have refused the proposal. Firstly, by virtue of the generic design of the building, its finishes and its placement on the site, the proposal is not in keeping with the surrounding area and would result in incongruous development which would adversely affect the character and visual amenity of the local area and would not contribute positively to the surrounding existing built environment. Accordingly, the proposal is contrary to Policy 1A placemaking of the adopted Perth and Kinross LDP 2, which requires that all new developments contribute positively to the quality of the surrounding built and natural environment, and the design and siting respects the character and amenity of the place concerned. Secondly, by virtue of the generic design of the building, its finishes and its placement on the site, the proposal is not in keeping with the surrounding area and would result in an incongruous development which would adversely affect the historic character and appearance of an important local area of the Crieff Conservation Area. Accordingly, the proposal is contrary to Policy 28A, New Development in Conservation Areas of the Perth and Kinross LDP 2, and Policy 7D, Historic Assets of MPF 4. Both these policies state that new development must preserve or enhance the character or appearance of the conservation area, and the design materials, scale and siting of new development within a conservation area should not impact upon the special qualities of the area and should be appropriate and sympathetic to the appearance, character and setting of the conservation area. Thirdly, by virtue of the generic design of the building, its finishes and its placement on the site, the proposal is not in keeping with the surrounding area and would result in an incongruous development which would adversely affect the historic setting and character associated with 3 listed buildings. Accordingly, the proposal is contrary to Policy 27A, listed buildings of the Perth and Kinross LDP 2, and Policy 7C, Historic Assets of MPF 4. Both these policies state that new development affecting the setting of a listed building should preserve its character and its special architectural or historic interest. Fourthly, no regard has been given to the local building context, character and site-specific circumstances in the design or placement of the proposed building, and the proposal does not respect the existing character and qualities of the local area. Accordingly, the proposal is contrary to Perth and Kinross Council's statutory supplementary planning guidance on placemaking, which states that any proposed development on a gap or brownfield site may only be permitted where the proposal enriches and does not detract from the character and qualities of the existing built environment, and the site size, form, density, architecture, and the scope fits in with the character of the surrounding area. And finally, by virtue of the generic design of the building, its finishes, and its placement on the site, the proposal is not in keeping with the surrounding area and would result in an incongruous development which would adversely affect the character and appearance of the conservation area, the historic setting and character of adjacent listed buildings, and accordingly, approval would be contrary to the requirements of the Planning, Listed Building and Conservation Areas Scotland Act 1997, in particular sections 64.1 and 59.1. These sections require the Council as planning authority to ensure that all decisions they make pay special attention to the desirability of preserving or enhancing the character or appearance of the conservation area, and shall have special regard to the desirability of preserving the listed building or its setting to the or any special features of historic or architectural interest which it possesses. An approval would not meet these requirements. So turning to the detailed assessment provided by the Planning Service, in terms of principle and from a purely land use point of view, a place of worship within a town centre location does not necessarily raise any issues. The site is vacant and overgrown, and the principle of development on such a brownfield site in a town centre is acceptable. However, any new development on this site needs to be one which does not detract from overall character and appearance of the conservation area or adversely impact the setting of the adjacent listed buildings. As such, in terms of design, scale and positioning, the proposal would have an adverse effect on the visual amenity of the area by virtue of not being compatible with the existing historic character and appearance of the area. In terms of placemaking, new development must be compatible with and respect the surrounding environment, and the supplementary guidance specifically refers to gap or brownfield sites, insofar as any proposal must enrich and not detract from the character and qualities of the existing built environment, and the site size, form, density and scope must fit with the character of the surrounding area. What is proposed is very generic and it has not been designed to be site-specific. The proposal does not reflect or have any meaningful relationship to the scale and design of the other corners, and the single-storey design with a shallow pitched roof are not appropriate in this location. The proposal is set back from the pavement in contrast to the other buildings. The proposed finishes are not acceptable for a conservation area, and the setting of the adjacent listed buildings is not respected. The applicant's case, the initial comments made by the applicant state that the proposal is for a new Kingdom Hall with capacity for 110 people that meets the modern standard for energy efficiency, space, layout, amenities, and comfort for teaching, learning, and worship. Site works include refurbishing the existing adjacent car parking area and new landscaping and planting. The church will be open to all members of the public and can be used for weddings, funerals, and meetings. The site is defined by two main areas. The northwestern section was used as a car park with a compressed gravel surface. The boundaries are formed by brick walls and railings down the sides, and trees and bushes to the rear, with the front mainly open to Commissioner Street. The second area sits to the southeast, forming a corner plot where the original hotel building was situated. The two areas are split by a public right-of-way, which leads to the car park of Union Terrace. With the building now demolished, the site is currently covered with grass, gravel, and some low-level planting. Kingdom halls are generally based on a standardised design approach that stems from their principal function as a meeting place to learn and worship. They are designed to be modest, simple buildings whilst being recognisable as a place of worship. The building has been positioned back from King Street to leave the corner open and remove any visual interference with the existing listed buildings. The form and height reflects the existing buildings to the rear and some nearby terraced buildings. The pitched roof is single-storey and will not interfere with the roofscape or cause overshadowing. The appellant was then provided the council's, the planning authority's report and made some further comments, including that they had sought to engage on the proposal and offered amendments to the materials and the frontage position. The fourth corner argument should no longer be relevant in the context that there is no longer a building here and should not require reapplication of a lost building's height and massing as a prerequisite to acceptability. The market reality in Crieff must be acknowledged because there are numerous vacant three-storey historic buildings in the town centre, demonstrating that there is no viable market for such a build. The proposal leaves space for a larger building to be built adjacent to Market Street if demand and funding align in the future. This balanced approach brings the site back into beneficial use without foreclosing longer-term opportunities. The proposal more aligns with nearby modern developments and in the position of the two-storey flat roof extension of the former hotel. The streetscape already includes modern, non-conforming elements, which illustrates that the conservation area is not homogeneous and that sensitive, modern infill can sit comfortably within it. A requirement to recreate a tall, ornate corner block is not supported by the actual pattern of development on and around the site today. The building is not generic, it is calmly contemporary with simple proportions and neutral finishes intended to avoid over-assertion. It improves a long vacant brownfield site and introduces regular community use, stewardship and maintenance where none currently exist. The scheme's scale and cost are proportionate to its Class 10 use and to present market conditions. And then in terms of other considerations, the conservation team consider that the proposal would have an unacceptable impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area and that it would adversely impact on the setting of the surrounding listed buildings. Transport and Development have no objection in principle, but have recommended some further information is required and clarification on certain matters before any final decision would be made. Community Green Space note the right of way that passes through the site, but have not made any specific comment in that regard. There are no objections from structures and flooding and environmental health. And finally, there are 4 letters of support which state that the development will bring about visual improvement to the site. And there are 2 letters of objection concerned about an increase in traffic movements, impact on visual amenity, and land compatibility issues. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to questions. Councillor Illingworth
I have no questions, thank you.
and Councillor Allen.
I have no questions, thank you.
I have just one, and there was a point raised in the paperwork. The fact that the 4th corner has now gone, does that effectively change the importance of that junction? That was the point being made by the applicant, I think. I would have filed a good one.
No, I mean it's just because there was a building there, it's a site, and you have a planning application or appeal in front of you to determine that based on all the site characteristics and the relevant information. So I think you take it from scratch on the basis of the information you have, I would say.
Thank you. Well, in the absence of any further questions, members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? That is, the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor, or do we require more information? Councillor Illingworth?
Happy to proceed.
Councillor Allen?
Happy to proceed.
I too am happy to proceed. So, Councillor Illingworth, if you could start us off on this occasion.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like to move for refusal of this application for the reasons given by the planning service. Although this is a very nice building for some great purposes for learning and worship, it is in a conservation area and next on a corner of some absolutely marvelous listed buildings, and I just don't think it reflects the quality that's needed in this particular place.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Convener. Kingdom Halls, by what I've seen, are by design, they're simple designs for learning and worship. And of course, I would support such endeavours. However, this is the wrong design in the wrong place. We cannot have build for build's sake. Visual improvement will be apparent no matter what we do in this site. This proposal, however, is not in line with the surrounding area and is just inappropriate. So I would support the decision to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I think I'm going to have to join you and say that I would refuse the appeal. Obviously, it's an empty site, which we'd like to see some buildings on. A place of worship is no better, no worse than any other. It would be something different in that particular area. But it is a conservation area. And the style of building compared to a photograph they had of another building seems to be of a generic nature. And I think perhaps some consideration should be given to this if they wish to continue with it, perhaps pull the building forward into the building line. But whatever else, it needs to have at least a nod towards the fact that you are in a conservation area, and it needs to reflect the style and building materials that are there. As it stands at the moment, I'm going to join my colleagues and refuse the appeal. Thank you for that. And Mr. Elliott, that is a unanimous decision again.
Nothing much to add, Convener. I think that's the officer recommended refusal, page 334, 335. As I understand it, you're going with those reasons for refusal.
Exactly, yes. Thank you. And that, members, brings us to the end of today's list. Only remains for me to thank you all for your work today and for your contributions. Thank you, Mrs. Dearley, for your work, Mr. Elliott, Mr. Roberts, and we will see you on the next one, which I believe is towards the end of March. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.